At the far end of the conference room, 11 board members turned their heads, eyes narrowing toward the source of the voice. Standing there was a small black Asian girl, Mei Ling, maybe 12 or 13, thin, with neatly tied braids and oversized second-hand sneakers. She didn't fit the polished setting of Lexington Global's boardroom, and in their minds, she didn't belong. Mei Ling had slipped in unnoticed, trailing her mother, Hu Ying, who worked janitorial shifts at the company. Hu Ying had just entered to swap out a trash bin when Mei Ling's eyes caught the document that Chen Lexington, the CEO, was brandishing like a trophy. It was in Mandarin. Chen chuckled, waving the paper. If anyone here can read this, I'll give them my dinner. Maybe even my jet. It was a performance, not a promise, the kind of flourish from a man who loved the echo of his own voice. No one expected a response. Then came Mei Ling's voice, small but steady. If I translate this, can I eat? The room froze. Amusement turned to ice. Some board members scoffed, others smirked. Chen blinked, then sneered. What did you just say, kid? Mei Ling stepped forward. I said, if I translate it, can I eat? Laughter broke out. One board member muttered, where's her mother? This isn't a daycare. Hu Ying, mortified, rushed forward. Mei Ling, baby, please. This isn't the place. But Chen raised a hand, his smile sharp and mean. No, no. Let's hear from the little prodigy. He turned to Hu Ying, his tone biting. You bring your kid to work to beg? Is that the family trade? Hu Ying paled. Sir, I'm sorry. She didn't mean to. Chen cut her off. No, I bet you taught her to pipe up whenever food's around. That's the problem with your kind, a culture of handouts and excuses. Mei Ling's jaw tightened, but her gaze held firm. I can read it, she said, quieter now. And it's not begging if I earn it. The sneers faded. Chen barked a mocking laugh. Fine, let's be entertained. Give her the document. A junior assistant handed Mei Ling the paper, her fingers steady as she took it. Go on, Professor, Chen taunted. Translate. Mei Ling didn't hesitate. She began reading aloud, her voice soft at first, then gaining strength. Clause by clause, she translated the Mandarin legal contract with precision, her steady rhythm shifting the room's energy. What started as a spectacle became a revelation. By the second page, the CFO, Jianwei, leaned forward, brow creased. The legal chief, Su Jin, cross-referenced her work. Whispers rippled down the table. She's right, Su Jin said. She caught a red flag clause. It grants controlling interest to the partner if our patents lapse for a single quarter. That's sabotage. Another board member muttered, and this part lets the partner reroute profits through a secondary holding company outside U.S. jurisdiction. That's illegal. Chen's grin vanished. Mei Ling pointed to a paragraph. Here, it allows profit diversion. That's not just risky, it's against the law. Someone swore under their breath. Chen stared at the paper, then at Mei Ling. Who taught you this? My father, Mei Ling replied calmly. Before he passed. He taught me Mandarin every day. Said words were sharper than knives. Silence fell. Chen muttered, damn. He looked around. Someone get this girl some food. Real food, whatever she wants. His assistant nodded and left. Mei Ling stepped back, not triumphant, just weary. Hu Ying reached for her hand, but Mei Ling gently pulled away, standing tall. 10 minutes later, a tray arrived, grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, warm rolls with butter, and a cup of orange juice. No one spoke as it was set before her. Mei Ling sat cross-legged on the carpet, no chair offered, and began to eat. She didn't rush or gloat, just ate with the quiet focus of a hungry child, grateful but not groveling. The silence stretched. Chen watched her, then said softly, you understand more than just language, don't you? Mei Ling didn't look up. I understand what it's like to be invisible, and what it means to be heard. Hu Ying wiped her eyes quietly. Chen stood, adjusting his cufflinks, his voice softer now. Mei Ling, if you're willing, I'd like to see you again tomorrow. We might have more use for your talents. Mei Ling took another bite of chicken and nodded slightly. But next time, she said, don't yell at my mom. The words landed like a quiet slap. Chen nodded once. You're right. I was out of line. Mei Ling finished chewing, sipped her juice, and finally looked up. I'm not asking for a jet, she said. But I am asking you to listen. Really listen. She returned to her meal as if the world hadn't just shifted. In that room of glass and power, it wasn't the CEO with the final word. It was a girl with nothing in her pockets but everything in her voice. Sometimes, the smallest voice carries the greatest weight. The next morning, Mei Ling stood at the base of the Lexington Global building, clutching the worn strap of her backpack. She wore the same jeans, but her shirt was freshly pressed, buttoned to the top. Hu Ying stood beside her, eyes scanning the marble steps, half expecting this to be a mistake. But someone was waiting. Chen's assistant, a tall woman named Lina in a navy pencil skirt, greeted them with a polite, if awkward, smile. Mr. Lexington asked me to escort you to his office. Huiying hesitated. I don't want trouble. Mei Ling glanced up. We're not here for trouble, Mama. Just truth. They rode the elevator in silence, past floors of polished chrome and glass, until the doors opened onto the executive level. Everything was hushed, deliberate, like a gallery where only the elite could touch the art. In Chen's office, sunlight poured through a floor-to-ceiling window. He stood by it, not in a suit but a sweater and slacks, less CEO, more man searching for answers. Good morning, he said, turning. Thanks for coming back. Huiying gave a small nod. Mei Ling stepped forward. You said you had questions. Chen gestured to a small table. Sit down, please. Mei Ling sat down at the small table in Chen Lexington's office. Huiying remained standing, her arms crossed protectively, eyes darting nervously between her daughter and the CEO. Chen pulled out the same Mandarin contract from the previous day, now marked with sticky notes, highlights, and underlines. You uncovered something critical, Mei Ling, he said, his tone serious. This clause, it wasn't in our briefings, and none of my senior staff caught it. They didn't want you to, Mei Ling replied matter-of-factly. Someone hid it. Chen raised an eyebrow. You believe that? I know what I read. And I know when something's being buried. Chen didn't respond immediately. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a second document. This is from a week ago, he said. Internal communications. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I'd like your opinion. He handed it to her. Mei Ling scanned the pages, emails between a legal consultant and Weixing Huang, the company's chief financial officer. Her fingers paused on a line where Weixing had approved translation edits despite not speaking Mandarin. This isn't his signature, she said, pointing. It's a scan, probably pasted in. Chen's expression tightened. You think he's behind it? I think someone is. And he's the first place to look. A soft knock interrupted them. Su Jin, the legal chief, entered slowly, her face unreadable. Chen, she said, nodding politely to Huiying and Mei Ling, we have a problem. Huang just pulled all language services off the merger documentation. Claims it's to avoid internal confusion. Chen's jaw clenched. He's scrubbing the trail. I already made a backup, Mei Ling said quietly. I found it yesterday in the recycle bin folder. I printed a copy. She opened her backpack, pulling out a folded packet of papers, creased but clean, and handed it to Chen. He stared at the packet in disbelief. You backed up a corporate server? I backed up the trash can. Su Jin chuckled under her breath. Chen turned to Huiying. Your daughter may have just saved us millions. Huiying shook her head, her voice soft. She's 12 and already more useful than half my department. Mei Ling's eyes narrowed. That doesn't mean you can use me. Chen nodded, more serious now. You're right. That's not what I want. I want to fix what's broken, and I think you can help me see what others miss. Mei Ling leaned back. I'll help, but not for favors or dinner trays. I want something real. What are you asking for? She didn't hesitate. A scholarship. Not just for me, for kids like me. Smart kids who don't get seen because they clean your floors. Chen was silent for a moment. Then he stood, walked to the window, and gazed out at the skyline. I can do that, he said finally. We'll build a program. Quiet at first. Let's see where it leads. Mei Ling nodded once. Su Jin, flipping through the packet Mei Ling brought, paused. There's something here. A financial authorization tied to an overseas account. Mei Ling pointed again. That name, Xing Operations, it was in the margin notes of the contract yesterday. I remember. Chen sat down, hands steepled under his chin. This isn't just a miscommunication. Someone's trying to bleed this company from the inside. And they thought you'd never notice, Mei Ling said. But I did, Chen murmured. Because you spoke up. He pressed a button on his desk intercom. Get IT in here. I want a trace on every file Huang accessed in the last 60 days. Mei Ling stood. We should go now. Mama has to work. Chen rose. You'll come back. She shrugged. If you need me. He smiled faintly. I think I do. As they left, Chen watched them go, not as intruders or charity cases, but as unexpected allies fate had brought him. He turned to Su Jin. Get HR. We need to protect that girl. Su Jin tilted her head. From Huang? From anyone who thinks this company belongs only to men in suits. Downstairs, Mei Ling and Huiying stepped into the chilly morning air. Huiying looked at her daughter, eyes brimming with unspoken emotion. You okay, baby? I'm good, Mei Ling said. And for the first time in months, she meant it. Mei Ling sat quietly at the back of the city bus, her head resting against the cool window. Buildings blurred past in streaks of gray and silver, but her mind was on the boardroom, the tension in Chen Lexington's jaw, the way Sujin's hands trembled as she turned the contract's final page. Something was deeply wrong at Lexington Global, and whether she liked it or not, Mei Ling was now part of the story. Huiying sat beside her, arms folded tightly, studying her daughter as if trying to capture her expression forever. You really think he meant it about helping kids like you? Mei Ling didn't look away from the window. He meant it today. Huiying sighed. Just don't get your hopes up, baby. The world doesn't hand out scholarships just because you're smart. Mei Ling's lips tightened. I don't want a handout. I want them to see. Back at Lexington Tower, Chen paced his office. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. Wei Xinghuang was orchestrating something far bigger than a few hidden clauses. The Mandarin contract, the concealed financial authorizations, the timing, it all pointed to a deliberate plan. Chen didn't just need damage control, he needed answers. By noon, IT delivered their initial findings. Huang had accessed a protected server 3 weeks earlier, one housing international correspondence. 5 days later, he authorized vendor payments to a shell entity called Xing Procurement. The amounts were small individually but totaled over $7.2 million. The shell company was based in Macau. Chen slammed the report down. He's not just embezzling. He's building an exit. He picked up the phone and dialed Sujin. Get me Clara Zhang from finance. Discreetly. If Huang smells what we're doing, he'll burn the place down before we can trace it. Meanwhile, in another wing of the tower, Wei Xinghuang leaned back in his chair, chewing on a toothpick, eyes fixed on a live feed from the executive hallway cameras. He rewound the footage to the previous morning, watching the small black Asian girl in oversized sneakers walk into the boardroom like she owned it. His jaw clenched. He didn't know how she'd gotten that document, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Lexington was too close now. And the girl, she was a liability. Wei Xinghuang tapped a name into his phone, Akira Tanaka, cleaner for external messes. Text sent. Across the city, Mei Ling sat in her bedroom, a narrow cot in a shelter apartment, poring over a dog-eared folder filled with scraps she'd collected over months. Printouts from waste bins, half-shredded memos, even post-its with numbers she didn't fully understand. She had a gift for languages, yes, but also for patterns, shapes, details, things adults dismissed as background noise. One page caught her eye again, an old payment receipt addressed to a company called Everlight Services, but the account number was handwritten and identical to the one listed under Xing Procurement. She looked at her mom, who was folding laundry on the floor. Mama, I think someone's using different company names, but it's all the same account. Huiying didn't answer right away. You're not getting in too deep with this, right? You're not trying to fix a world that don't want fixing. Mei Ling looked up, calm but firm. I'm not fixing the world. Just exposing the ones breaking it. The next morning, Chen was waiting in the lobby when Mei Ling arrived. Walk with me, he said. They moved through the hall, avoiding eyes. There's more, he told her. We found money trails, files scrubbed clean, signatures forged. But it's not enough. We need someone from the inside to connect the dots. Mei Ling reached into her bag. You might not need one. I brought this. She handed him the Everlight invoice. Chen studied it, his eyes narrowing. Where did you find this? Trash bin in the finance office. Same account number as the one Huang used last week. He looked at her, both impressed and troubled. Do you realize what you're stepping into? She nodded. And I know how to walk quiet. Chen chuckled under his breath. You remind me of someone I used to be. Before the suits. Suddenly, a voice called from down the hall. Sir, you have a 10 a.m. with board audit. Chen glanced over his shoulder. I'll be back. As he walked off, Mei Ling turned to head down the back hallway. She passed the finance department and noticed a man, tall, white, unshaven, standing too close to a desk she knew wasn't his. He wasn't an employee. His badge didn't match, and he was holding one of her discarded papers. Her stomach turned. He looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, no one moved. Then he smiled. Mei Ling turned and walked quickly, but not too fast. She rounded the corner, ducked into the stairwell, and clutched the railing. Her hands trembled. Someone had found her, and not the good kind. That evening, Mei Ling didn't eat much. She barely spoke. Huiying noticed. You feeling all right, sweetheart? Mei Ling hesitated. Mama, if something ever happened to me, would you still believe I was doing the right thing? Huiying turned. Don't you talk like that. I mean it. Huiying knelt in front of her. The world's full of people who'd rather bury truth than face it. But what you're doing, it matters. I just don't want them to bury you, too. Mei Ling leaned into her mother's shoulder. I think someone's watching me. Huiying closed her eyes, heart thudding. Then we go to the police. Mei Ling shook her head. Not yet. They won't understand. But Chen might. Outside their apartment, a man sat in a black sedan. Engine off, watching, waiting. Inside, Mei Ling opened her notebook and started a new page. Title, Patterns of Power. If no one else was going to write the story, she would. Word by word, fact by fact. The truth didn't need an audience. It just needed someone brave enough to speak. The next morning, the clouds hung low over Chicago, casting a dull gray over the Lexington Tower. Chen Lexington stood by his office window, watching traffic snake through the streets below, steam rising from manholes like silent alarms. In his hand was Mei Ling's invoice from Everlight Services. On his desk, the latest IT report showed another set of forged approvals tied to that same account, this time routed through a third name, Maritech Logistics. All signs pointed back to Huang. But it wasn't just theft anymore. It was a coordinated, layered operation, precise enough to avoid detection for months and bold enough to implicate international entities. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep this buried, and a 12-year-old had uncovered it all. He turned as his office door cracked open. "Sir," said Su Jin, stepping in, "we just had a red flag. Someone accessed our internal logs from an external IP, masked location, likely a burner. They were looking for the meeting notes from yesterday's boardroom when Mei Ling was here." Chen's stomach sank. That confirms it then. They're watching her. "We need to act fast," she said. "If Huang knows she's the source, he won't hesitate." Chen stared at the floor, then reached for his desk phone. "Get me Mei Ling's mother. Now." Across the city, Mei Ling was sitting in the shelter's tiny kitchen, pencil in hand, flipping through her notebook. She had drawn a map, lines, names, arrows connecting companies and account numbers. At the bottom, she'd written, "Who profits if Lexington collapses?" Before she could write more, Huiying's phone rang. She answered, listened, then looked at Mei Ling with unease. "It's Mr. Lexington. He wants us to come in now." "Something's wrong," Mei Ling said quietly. They arrived at the building 25 minutes later. Chen met them not at his office, but in a small private break room on the third floor, windows covered, lights dimmed. "I'm sorry to call you in like this," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "But we believe someone inside the company is actively tracking your movements, Mei Ling." Huiying's hand immediately gripped her daughter's arm. "You mean someone's following her?" "We have a black sedan that's been circling your block since last night," Chen said. "Unmarked. No plates. My security picked it up at 3 a.m. Still parked there by sunrise." Huiying's voice trembled. "Why didn't you call the police?" "We will, but we need more than suspicion. And if we act too soon, we tip our hand." Mei Ling stayed silent, then finally spoke. "What do you need from me?" Chen leaned forward. "Everything. Every note, every scrap of paper you've copied. We're going to build a case, layer by layer. But you'll need to stay somewhere safe while we do." Huiying looked panicked. "You mean hiding her for a few days?" "I can place her in a secure residence," he said. "Monitored, quiet. We'll protect you, too." Huiying hesitated. Mei Ling didn't. "I'll go," she said. "But I'm not hiding. I'll keep working. If they want to scare me, they'll have to try harder." Chen nodded, the edges of his mouth lifting in a rare, solemn smile. That night, Mei Ling was escorted by 2 plainclothes security agents to a condo in Lincoln Park, clean, simple, fully monitored. The security system was top tier, with feeds wired directly into Lexington Tower's private network. Inside, Mei Ling unpacked her backpack, spreading her notes across the kitchen table. She opened her notebook and began writing, "If silence is the weapon of the powerful, then truth must be the whisper of the brave." Meanwhile, Chen called a closed meeting with his most trusted staff, Su Jin from legal, Clara Zhang from finance, and Rakesh Patel from cybersecurity. Together, they built a firewall of evidence, files Mei Ling found, IP traces, timestamps of file deletions, unexplained withdrawals. Piece by piece, the portrait of Weisheng Huang grew darker. Su Jin crossed her arms. "It's not just embezzlement. He's trying to devalue Lexington's public assets, redirect our patents offshore. Once our stock drops, someone steps in to buy us out cheap. He's setting us up for a hostile acquisition." Chen rubbed his temples. And he almost succeeded. Until Mei Ling. Back in the safe house, Mei Ling couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the streetlights blink. Her phone vibrated once. A new message from an unknown number: "Stop digging. You don't know what you're touching." Mei Ling stared at the screen. Without fear, she typed back, "You should be scared because I do." She powered off the phone and returned to her map. The next morning, Huiying arrived at the safe house with a packed lunch and a worried face. Mei Ling hugged her quickly. "Don't worry," she whispered. "They don't get to win. But Huiying looked past her toward the window, the streets, the empty corners of the building. They might not need to win, baby, she said quietly. They just need to make you disappear. Mei Ling's smile faded. She returned to her table, grabbed a sticky note, and wrote one phrase: names protect people. Silence buries them. Then she opened her notebook and added a new chapter, Whispers, Part 1, Huang. Somewhere nearby, an engine started. A figure in a black sedan picked up a phone. She's in, he said. A pause, then, make her. The second night in the safe house was different. The first had been quiet, uneasy, but safe. Mei Ling had slept with the light on, notebook under her pillow, knowing Chen Lexington's private security was parked outside. But on the second night, something changed. It began with a sound, soft, too soft for most to notice. But Mei Ling had grown up in shelters and thin-walled apartments. She knew the difference between an old pipe and a hinge under pressure. She sat up in bed, heart thudding. The room was dark except for a sliver of streetlight creeping through the blinds. Another sound, a click. The front door. Mei Ling slid off the bed silently, her feet touching the hardwood floor with practiced quiet. She reached for the tiny flashlight Chen had given her, just in case, he'd said, and padded toward the hallway. The floorboards creaked once. She froze, waited, listened. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Inside the house. Her mind raced. The security team, where were they? Had they been compromised? She ducked into the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled her phone from under her shirt, texting one word to Chen, inside. She didn't wait for a reply. Instead, she opened the air vent on the floor, one she'd spotted when she first arrived. Too small to escape through, but maybe big enough for what she needed. From the base of the sink, she pulled out her backpack. She kept it close, always. It held everything, her notes, her maps, even backup USBs hidden in candy wrappers. Another footstep outside the door. She crouched and began feeding her notebook into the vent, one page at a time, wrapping them in a plastic grocery bag she'd saved from lunch. Her hands shook, but her breathing stayed quiet. Then came the voice, male, calm, almost gentle. Mei Ling, kid. You're a smart girl, too smart for your own good. She froze. We don't want to hurt you. We just want what you found. That's fair, isn't it? Mei Ling didn't answer. You can't win this. You're a little girl playing spy in a game built for wolves. Open the door. Let's end this before it gets messy. She clenched her jaw, pulled the last item from her bag, a small voice recorder, already running. Then, carefully, she opened the window. It didn't go far, but it made enough noise to draw attention. There was a pause outside. Footsteps moved toward the window. That was her chance. Mei Ling turned the lock and bolted down the hallway, past the kitchen, toward the front door, and into a dark figure. She yelped. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. But before he could speak, a blast of light exploded behind him. Freeze, a voice shouted. Chen's security team stormed in, weapons drawn. The man holding her dropped to his knees as 3 agents pinned him to the ground. Mei Ling stumbled back, heart racing. One of the guards knelt beside her. You okay? She nodded, breathless. He wanted the files. Chen arrived 10 minutes later, hair disheveled, shirt untucked. He looked at Mei Ling, then at the man being dragged away in cuffs. Do we know who he is? Not yet, the lead guard said. Fake ID, but he's ex-military. Definitely trained. Chen knelt beside Mei Ling. Did he hurt you? No, she said. But he was inside before they got here. Chen looked at the window. You bought us time. She handed him the plastic bag. They wanted these, so I hid them. He took it with reverence, like someone accepting a flag from a fallen soldier. Mei Ling, what you did tonight took guts. She looked up at him, eyes hard. It's not about guts. It's about not letting them erase me. Later that morning, inside Lexington Tower, Chen summoned his inner circle again. Security was breached, he said. They came after a child. That makes this personal. He handed the bag to Sujin. Scan everything. Cross-reference those aliases. He turned to Rakesh. Trace the phone she used. I want to know who sent that man and what else they know. Sujin flipped through the documents. There's a pattern here. These shell companies aren't just fake, they're linked to our competitors. I recognize 2 from an attempted merger last year. They tried to buy us out quietly. So this was the fallback, Chen said. Bleed us from the inside until we collapse. Mei Ling wasn't supposed to be part of the story, Rakesh added. She was an accident they didn't account for. Chen's jaw tightened. That accident just saved this company. Back at the safe house, Mei Ling sat curled on the couch, sipping hot cocoa. Huiying was beside her, pale and shaken but relieved, brushing a hand through Mei Ling's braids. I should have pulled you out of this sooner. Mei Ling leaned into her shoulder. If you did, they would have won. You don't have to fight everyone's battles. I'm not, Mei Ling whispered. Just this one. She picked up her notebook and opened to a fresh page, Whispers, Part 2, The Wolves. As she wrote, a news alert flashed on the television screen, Lexington Global investigating internal fraud scheme. CEO promises, no one above truth. Mei Ling smiled. They hadn't silenced her. Now the wolves were the ones running scared. The Lexington Tower boardroom felt colder than usual. The blinds were drawn halfway, muting the light. The men and women seated around the polished table weren't laughing now. No coffee sipping, no scrolling emails during presentations. They were listening because Chen Lexington wasn't smiling. He stood at the head of the table, flanked by Sujin and Rakesh, holding up a printed chart, company names, payment amounts, offshore accounts, with a central node labeled Weixing Huang. Everything you see here, Chen said, voice low but steady, came from the work of one 12-year-old girl. Let that sink in. A few glances flickered across the table, some skeptical, others uneasy. She traced the paper trail that internal audits missed, Chen continued. She uncovered shell companies registered to fake addresses in Nevada. Payments funneled out over 18 months. And last night, someone broke into a secure safe house to retrieve what she found. He let the silence settle, then turned to Rakesh. Tell them what we learned from the intruder. Rakesh nodded. The man was former private security, discharged from a firm connected to Barlow Equity, one of the investors circling our shares for months. He was paid in cryptocurrency from a burner wallet we traced back to a laptop previously registered to Huang's assistant. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Chen pressed on. Let's be clear, Huang didn't just betray this company. He invited wolves into our home and gave them the keys. One board member raised a hand. Shouldn't we contact the FBI? We already have, Sujin said. They're reviewing everything as of this morning. But if we want to survive this, we need to clean house ourselves before federal agents knock with subpoenas. Chen placed the chart down and looked around. This isn't just about numbers anymore. It's about who we are and whether we'll let greed rot us from the inside. Back at the safe house, Mei Ling was organizing her files. Huiying hovered in the kitchen, wringing a damp dish towel. You sure you want to go back there today? She asked. Mei Ling nodded. Chen's calling a full staff meeting. He wants me to speak. Huiying blinked. Speak? Like, in front of the company. They need to hear the truth, Mei Ling said. Not from a CEO. From someone who sees what they don't want to see. You're just a kid, Mei Ling. That's why they'll listen. The Lexington Tower auditorium was packed. Employees from every department, finance, marketing, IT, even janitorial, filled the rows. Chen stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. Most of you know me as the man whose name is on this building. But today, I'm not here to talk about leadership. I'm here to talk about failure, my own. He paused. For months, this company was bleeding, and I didn't see it. But someone else did. He turned. And she's here today. Mei Ling stepped onto the stage, her backpack slung over one shoulder. A ripple of disbelief ran through the crowd. A child? Here? But then she spoke. I don't work here. I don't wear a badge. I'm not a shareholder. But I'm someone who notices things. Silence fell. I saw documents that didn't match, payments that didn't add up. And I saw people turning away because it wasn't their problem. She paused. Everyone says truth matters, but most only want truth when it's easy, when it doesn't cost them comfort. I'm just a kid, but I'm not afraid of discomfort. Huiying watched from the back, tears in her eyes. Mei Ling continued. Some people in this room knew what was happening. Some ignored it. Some helped hide it. Now the rest of you get to choose, look away, or help fix it. Chen stepped forward. We will be making sweeping changes starting today. Every department will undergo a full audit. Every suspicious transaction reviewed. Anyone found complicit, no matter how high, will be held accountable. Applause broke out, uncertain at first, then stronger. After the meeting, Mei Ling sat with Chen in his office. He poured her a glass of orange juice and leaned on his desk. You've done more than anyone here, Mei Ling. You exposed the cracks. She sipped the juice. Cracks are only dangerous if you pretend they're not there. He smiled. You ever think about law school? I think about telling stories, she said. The kind people don't want told. He nodded. Well, whatever path you take, you've already changed the ending to ours. As Mei Ling and Huiying left the building later that day, something had shifted. People held doors for them, nodded, smiled, not with pity, but with respect. Outside, the air felt lighter. A reporter waiting by the sidewalk called out, Miss Zhou, is it true you saved Lexington Global? Mei Ling paused, then said with a soft smile, no. I just told the truth. She walked on, backpack bouncing lightly behind her, into the noise of the city that, for once, seemed ready to listen. 3 days after Mei Ling's speech, Chen Lexington sat in his private conference room, eyes locked on a series of documents just delivered from the FBI. The agents had moved swiftly, perhaps too swiftly, uncovering something even he hadn't expected: multiple offshore companies linked to a shadow entity named Harbor Edge Holdings. The name had appeared, faint and unassuming, on several of Mei Ling's collected documents, unnoticed until now. Su Jin stood at his side, brow furrowed. They're not just laundering money. They've been using Harbor Edge to buy influence, media ads, legal favors, even political donations under the radar. Chen's jaw tightened. And Huang's the gatekeeper. He signed off on every transfer, every fake invoice, every wire out of our corporate accounts. But he didn't do it alone. Rakesh leaned in from the other side of the table. The emails we intercepted, some came from his personal laptop, but others were routed through a private network, possibly encrypted. The strange part? Some were sent during hours he wasn't even logged in. Chen sat back, mind racing. So either someone's using his credentials, or he's covering for someone bigger. Just then, his assistant cracked the door. "Sir, there's someone here asking for you. Says he used to work here. Shinji Kato." Chen's eyes narrowed. That name hadn't crossed his ears in over a year. Shinji Kato was once the head of legal affairs, clever, ambitious, and quietly forced out after a disagreement over policy decisions. He'd left without lawsuits or bad press. Too quietly. "Send him in," Chen said. The door opened, and Shinji entered, older, leaner, his hair streaked with more gray. He didn't smile. "I watched the speech," he said, voice flat. "The girl's good. Better than anyone you have working for you." Chen studied him. "You didn't come here for compliments. What do you want?" Shinji folded his hands. "To stop what's coming. And I need to tell you a story." Sujin crossed her arms. "We're listening." Shinji exhaled. 18 months ago, I discovered discrepancies in merger contracts. Small but suspicious. When I brought them up, Huang told me to drop it. Said it was authorized from above. I pushed back. The next day, I was asked to resign. Chen frowned. "You never came to me." "I did. You were in Hong Kong. By the time you came back, the story had been written: legal violation, NDA breach. I was out, and the paperwork made it clean." Sujin's voice sharpened. "Are you saying Huang forged your exit documents?" Shinji hesitated. "I'm saying someone else wrote the script. Huang was just playing the lead." "Who?" Chen asked. Shinji leaned forward. "Barlow Equity." Silence fell. "The same firm that's been quietly buying our shares?" Sujin asked. Shinji nodded. "They approached me after I left. Offered a position if I stayed quiet. Promised shares, bonuses, even a seat at the table if the Lexington merger collapsed." Chen's knuckles went white against the table's edge. "You didn't take it?" "I did," Shinji said. "For 3 days. Then I walked away. Too much blood in the water." Rakesh asked quietly, "Do you have proof?" Shinji reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive. Emails, wire instructions, voice memos, including one with Huang panicking after Mei Ling's speech. Chen took it slowly. Shinji stood. "I came here because whatever you think you're dealing with, it's bigger. Barlow doesn't just want your company. They want to control the narrative. And Mei Ling just became their biggest threat." Back at the safe house, Mei Ling sat at the kitchen table, flipping through old newspapers. Headlines about Lexington Global's turnaround were everywhere. Her name appeared in passing, but never front and center, just as Chen had promised: "We'll protect your name, not exploit it." Huiying poured coffee at the counter. "You've been quiet today." Mei Ling traced her fingers over a headline: CEO Chen Lexington promises reform in wake of internal scandal. "They still don't know the whole story," she said. "Maybe they're not ready for it yet." "Truth doesn't wait for readiness," Mei Ling replied. Just then, her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number: "You think it's over? It's just beginning." Attached was a photo, her school, taken from across the street, time-stamped an hour ago. She stared at it, heart pounding. Huiying noticed. "Mei Ling, what is it?" Mei Ling turned the phone so her mother could see. Huiying's hand flew to her mouth. "No." Mei Ling stood. "We need to go now." At Lexington Tower, Chen was reviewing Shinji's files when his assistant burst in. "Sir, we have a situation." Mei Ling's safe house was compromised again. Someone left a photo under the door. No fingerprints, just a warning. Chen's face darkened. "They're escalating." Sujin's voice trembled with anger. "They're not trying to silence her. They're trying to terrorize her." "We move her again," Chen said. "Full surveillance, double guards. And this time, we go on the offensive." He grabbed his coat. Call the press. No more whispers. If they want to play public, we'll speak louder. Outside the safe house, police sirens began to blare. But Mei Ling was already gone, tucked in the back seat of an unmarked car, Huiying holding her hand tight. They want me scared, Mei said. They want you gone, Huiying whispered. But I'm still here. In Mei Ling's eyes, there was no fear, only fire, the kind that burns through lies, one truth at a time. The wind picked up as the black SUV pulled into the underground garage beneath Lexington Tower. Mei Ling sat quietly in the back seat, hands balled into fists. Huiying was beside her, one arm gently wrapped around her shoulder, but her eyes remained fixed ahead, unblinking. There was a pressure in the air, a warning, invisible but real. The closer they got to the center of this storm, the more dangerous it felt. When the door opened, Chen was waiting. He wore no tie, sleeves rolled, exhaustion shadowing his eyes, but his voice was firm. We've secured the top floor. No media, no leaks. You'll be safe here. Mei Ling stepped out of the car. Safe's just a word, Mr. Lexington. It's not real if people still want me gone. Huiying gave Chen a glance heavy with gratitude and weariness. If anything happens to her here, anything, I'll hold you personally responsible. He nodded. Understood. They entered through a side elevator that opened directly into a private floor, no windows, reinforced walls, security stationed at every corner. Rakesh was already inside, setting up a bank of monitors. On the screen, the photo Mei Ling had received of her school was blown up, enhanced, and geotagged. We traced the image metadata, Rakesh said. It was uploaded to a cloud folder registered to an email used by a former Lexington contractor linked to Barlow's subsidiary. The timing matches when Shinji warned us. Mei Ling sat in front of the monitors. They're sending messages, testing us. Chen asked quietly, what's the endgame here? Rakesh looked grim. Destabilize the company, drive public fear, force a board vote to sell. With Huang disgraced and out of the way, they'll slide in with an acquisition offer through a third party. Clean, legal, and irreversible. But they didn't plan for Mei Ling, Su Jin added, stepping into the room. She became a variable, and now they're improvising. Mei Ling turned to Chen. Then let's give them a new variable. Me, in front of a camera. Huiying's voice cracked. Mei Ling, no. Absolutely not. I won't say names, Mei Ling said quickly. But I'll say what matters, that truth isn't a threat, that silence helps nobody but the ones who hide in it. Chen hesitated, then nodded slowly. A controlled interview, with conditions. We use it to frame the narrative before they can. Huiying shook her head, but Mei Ling gently took her hand. Mama, they're not backing down, and neither will I. The following morning, a camera crew from WNCL, a respected local network, arrived at the tower under strict confidentiality. No names were released, no story pre-pitched, just one promise, a girl who saw everything and chose to speak anyway. They set up in a softly lit studio, a curtain drawn behind the interviewee's chair. No direct camera on Mei Ling's face, just her voice, her silhouette. The journalist, a seasoned black woman named Layla Reed, adjusted her mic and sat opposite her. You ready, sweetheart? Mei Ling gave a small nod. Layla began. Can you tell us, in your own words, how this started? Mei Ling looked down for a moment, then spoke, voice steady. It started with a piece of paper in the trash. A number that didn't match. Then another, and another. I asked questions. Nobody answered, so I kept looking. Layla leaned forward. Did you ever feel afraid? Mei Ling hesitated. Yes. But I felt angry, too. I didn't understand why people would lie or hide money or hurt others just to stay rich. It didn't make sense. And now, Layla asked, what would you say to the people watching? Those who don't believe a girl like you could see something others missed. Mei Ling sat taller. I'd tell them it wasn't about seeing more. It was about refusing to look away. Back in the tower's control room, Chen watched the feed with Su Jin. Neither spoke. When the interview ended, Layla turned to Mei Ling, her voice softer. You're brave and rare. Don't let the world dull that. Mei Ling smiled faintly. I won't. By nightfall, the segment aired in a primetime special titled The Girl Who Wouldn't Be Quiet. It spread faster than anyone expected, news outlets, podcasts, radio shows. People didn't need to see Mei Ling's face, they heard her heart and believed her. Online, the reaction exploded, that kid has more spine than most politicians. We need to protect her like we protect whistleblowers. Truth from the mouth of a child, nothing's more powerful. At Lexington Tower, Chen received a call from the Department of Justice. They were launching a formal investigation into Barlow Equity and requested full cooperation. By morning, the stock dipped slightly, then rebounded and rose. Public trust was shifting, and investors could feel it. But not everyone was pleased. Inside a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, a phone was slammed against the wall. A man in a tailored navy suit stood at the window, watching the city burn with light. "She's turning the tide," he hissed. Another man seated in the shadows replied coolly, "Then we turn it back." The suited man snarled. "How?" "Take away her platform. And if that fails, take away her voice." That night, as Mei Ling sat by the window of her secured suite, her phone buzzed again. No message this time, just a video. Her school playground, empty except for a single piece of paper taped to the swing set. The video zoomed in slowly. For words written in thick red marker, "We're not done yet." Mei Ling stared at the screen, then stood. She didn't scream or cry. She walked to her notebook and added a new chapter, Whispers, Part 3, The Reckoning. If they weren't done, neither was she. The morning after the video threat, Mei Ling awoke before the sun. The city outside her window still slept, but inside her, something had stirred. She moved like someone who had crossed a line within herself, no longer just reacting to danger, but preparing to confront it. Downstairs, Chen Lexington was in the command room, sleeves rolled, a second cup of coffee steaming beside a digital map tracking corporate activity. Rakesh was poring over access logs. Sujin was on a video call with legal counsel. Everything was in motion. When Mei Ling entered, the room quieted for a moment. She walked to the table, opened her notebook, and placed a new page in front of them. The page showed a pattern even Rakesh hadn't noticed yet. These companies, Mei Ling began, pointing to the list, aren't just linked to Lexington. They're tied to infrastructure, transport, energy, logistics. If Lexington falls, it's not just a company collapsing. It's a chain reaction. Chen studied the diagram. "You're saying Barlow doesn't want to buy us?" Mei Ling nodded. "They want to crash the system, devalue every asset in their path, buy the rubble for pennies, and rebuild under their control." Rakesh looked stunned. "That's why they've been investing in our competitors while bleeding us." Sujin whispered, "A corporate coup." Mei Ling pulled out a flash drive. "This has a voice recording. I found it in an old thread from one of the flagged IPs. I think it's Huang talking to someone higher up. He calls it the reset." Chen's face darkened. "Play it." Rakesh plugged it in, and the room filled with Huang's distorted voice. "We wait for the audit leak. Panic will ripple through the investors. Lexington stock drops. Then we file the claim against the pension fund. That'll spook the unions. They'll fold. Phase 2 begins. The reset starts with the weak link." Silence fell like a stone. "They want chaos," Chen said softly. "Engineered collapse." "And Mei Ling just gave us the blueprint," Sujin added. Huiying, who had entered quietly behind them, finally spoke. "And what are you going to do with this? Put it in a folder? Let the feds take 5 years to sort it out while they keep hunting my daughter?" "No," Chen said, standing. "We leak it ourselves." Sujin blinked. "You mean go public with a confession? A whistleblower file?" Chen nodded. "We give it to every journalist who covered Mei Ling's interview. Let the world hear Huang. Let them hear what's really at stake." Rakesh added, "And if we combine it with the financial map Mei Ling created, we prove motive, intent, not just fraud, but sabotage." Within hours, the files were anonymized and uploaded to a secure cloud. A press email was drafted, signed under the name The Zhou Project, a tribute Mei Ling insisted on keeping modest, no name, just impact. The leaks dropped just after noon. By 12:08 p.m., the reset conspiracy was trending nationwide. By 12:19 p.m., Lexington's investor phone lines were overwhelmed. By 10:03 p.m., Barlow Equity's legal team issued a public denial. But by 2:10 p.m. the next day, the Department of Justice had issued subpoenas. And Mei Ling? She sat on the floor of her suite, eating peanut butter crackers, watching it unfold on 3 monitors. "Is this what winning feels like?" she asked quietly. Huiying didn't answer right away. She looked at her daughter, tired, brilliant, far too old for her age, and smiled sadly. "It's what standing your ground feels like." But the victory was not complete. That night, as Chen reviewed the fallout with his team, Rakesh's screen blinked, a warning. "Unusual activity on the Lexington employee database," he said. "Someone's trying to delete records. Entire profiles, HR, payroll, legal logs." "Trace it," Chen snapped. Sujin leaned forward. "Who would want to delete personnel files now?" Rakesh's fingers flew. "Wait, this isn't coming from outside. It's internal, from a VPN tied to the West Archives. That's where we store legacy records, contracts, old employee logs, and whistleblower files." Mei Ling, who had joined them quietly, whispered, "They're trying to erase the evidence before the DOJ can seize it." Chen grabbed his phone. "Send a team there now." At the West Archives, a building Lexington Global had owned for decades, 2 plainclothes agents arrived minutes later. The room was dark, dust swirling in their flashlight beams. Someone was there, caught mid-transfer, a man hunched over a laptop, pulling out USB drives, trying to delete files manually. "Freeze," an agent barked. The man turned. It was an IT contractor from Lexington, someone Mei Ling had met once, who had given her a ride to the first interview. She stared at the screen feed in shock. "That's Peng. He was kind to me." Rakesh looked up from his screen. He was also paid off, $40,000 wired last week from a Barlow shell company. Mei Ling sat down slowly. "They were always closer than we thought." Back at the tower, as the night deepened, the team began restoring the wiped files. But the sense of security had cracked. Sujin poured herself a coffee and sat beside Mei Ling. "You're handling this better than most grown men I've seen." Mei Ling shrugged. "I don't have the luxury of pretending it's not happening." Chen returned from the war room, holding a fresh printout. "The DOJ just sent this. They've fast-tracked the investigation. Barlow's assets are being frozen. And Huang? He tried to fly to Panama tonight. They caught him in Atlanta." Huiying exhaled. "So, it's over?" "No," Chen said quietly. "Not yet. But they're on the run now." Mei Ling picked up her notebook and scribbled 3 words across the top of a fresh page: "The end begins." Because justice wasn't just about stopping the villains, it was about ensuring they never returned. Attached to the leaks was a zip file of documents, plans, and evidence that Barlow was using its education shell company to destroy low-income communities under the guise of redevelopment. By dawn, the story broke: corporate empire quietly displacing minority communities under school expansion plan, read one headline. Barlow Equity's real estate web unravels, more than just finance, said another. Social media exploded. Teachers posted pictures of old classrooms. Students shared memories of playgrounds, mentors, and schools that had saved them. Parents rallied outside city halls, demanding accountability. And Mei Ling watched it all from the tower's rooftop garden, a place Chen had shown her when she first arrived. She sat on a bench beneath a low tree, the wind tugging gently at her hoodie. Huiying joined her with a bag of apples and sat beside her daughter. "You know," Huiying said softly, "most people your age are worried about math tests. School dances." Mei Ling gave a small smile. "I think I skipped that part." "Maybe. But that doesn't mean you're alone." Mei Ling looked up at the clouds. "Sometimes it feels like I'm trying to stop a tidal wave with a paper boat." Huiying nudged her. "Well, maybe that boat's made of something stronger." "Like what?" "Conviction." Mei Ling was quiet for a while, then turned to her mom. "I don't want to just be the girl who exposed something. I want to be the one who rebuilt what they tried to destroy." Chen found them there 20 minutes later, holding a thick folder stamped with a seal. "We got it," he said. "Court-ordered seizure of all Barlow educational assets. They're frozen. They can't move forward, and they'll be audited." Mei Ling exhaled slowly. "Good. There's more," he added, handing her the folder. She opened it, a formal letter. Lexington Global was offering her a full scholarship. Any school, any state, any level. She could pick her future. Mei Ling read it, then looked up. "I'm not ready to walk away yet." Chen smiled. "Didn't think you were. That offer doesn't expire." That night, Mei Ling wrote in her notebook again, Whispers, Part 4, Reclamation. She wrote not just of villains and systems, but of the voices that rose in protest, of parents who refused to be erased, teachers who remembered every name, children who deserved better. This chapter wasn't about war. It was about what came after, building again, louder, stronger, together. And though Barlow wasn't finished, neither was she. Not by a long shot. A week later, the sun filtered softly through the tall mosaic windows of the community center where Mei Ling and her mother now lived. The space had once been a meeting hall for local youth groups, but today it was set up for a town hall meeting about the threatened neighborhood school slated for demolition. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle, parents clutching flyers in their hands. At the center, Mei Ling stood next to the mayor, who looked both exhausted and relieved. "Thank you all for coming," the mayor began. "We're here because one young citizen believed a school is more than just a building. She believed a neighborhood had a right to exist. Today, we declare that right unbroken." The crowd murmured approval. Mei Ling scanned the faces: friends, neighbors, teachers, parents. They had come together to reclaim their community. This wasn't just about stopping Barlow's plan, it was about starting again. Chen, standing just behind the mayor, nodded at Mei Ling. He had brought legal advisors, architects, and some of Lexington Global's funding partners. Together, they pledged resources: repair the old school, convert the old Renaissance Annex into a youth center, restore neighborhood housing, and involve local residents in planning the next steps. When the hall emptied, Mei Ling sat cross-legged on the wood floor, tired but impossibly alive. Huiying sat beside her, squeezing her shoulder. You changed a whole city block, baby, Huiying said, her voice trembling. Mei Ling shrugged, tucking a braid behind her ear. It wasn't me. It was them, us. As people filed out, Chen remained behind, watching the exuberant children coloring the old chalkboards, their laughter echoing off the walls. I want to talk to you, he said to Mei Ling later, his tone gentle. They walked to a small office at the back. Chen closed the door and offered her a seat. You know you don't have to hold all this weight forever, he said. Mei Ling looked at him, brow furrowed. It doesn't feel like weight. He smiled. Whatever it is, it works. Just don't lose yourself. She nodded, then paused. There's something else. I don't want to leave this town. Not yet. Chen's expression softened. Then stay. He passed her a letter, official, from Lexington Global. Scholarship indefinitely extended, including housing and travel support, on the condition that you remain involved in community programs. Mei Ling stared at it, then exhaled. I'm home. Huiying held her arm tight later that night. You almost didn't choose this. Mei Ling shrugged. I almost did. But then I thought, what if the person who needs saving most is the one who gets saved by staying? Not leaving. Huiying let her head fall in relief. Then we stay. The next morning, Mei Ling and Huiying met with the school's principal and a small team of educators. They discussed restoring classrooms, restocking the library, hiring tutors, and offering after-school mentorship. Money was part of it, but love and intention were just as vital. Mei Ling volunteered to help schedule sessions, paint murals, and recruit storytellers. In the following days, the old school buzzed with activity. Volunteers arrived with paintbrushes. Lunch was delivered by local chefs. Textbooks arrived, donated by Lexington Global staff. The neighborhood rallied. One afternoon, Mei Ling sat on the school's front steps, her notebook open on her lap. She wrote, Whispers, Part 5, Foundations. She watched a group of younger kids chase each other, their laughter raw and fearless. Beside her, an elderly teacher, Ms. Tanaka, approached, gray hair pulled back, gentle smile. You're doing something powerful, young lady, Ms. Tanaka said. Not many know what strength it takes to stay. Mei Ling looked at her. You stayed here your whole life, too? Ms. Tanaka nodded. I taught here for 40 years. I saw kids come and go, but the heart of this place, that never dies. Mei Ling shut her notebook. Then it's not just about saving buildings. It's about remembering what belongs. In the evening, Chen visited with paperwork and updates. He told Mei Ling the DOJ investigation was escalating. Barlow's assets were frozen, and Huang had accepted a plea deal. Trials were scheduled. Justice was catching up. But he left her with something quieter. I've asked the board to create a youth advisory council, he said. Will you lead it? Mei Ling's eyes widened. For all of Lexington? He nodded. We want to build from what happened here, not just survive. You helped uncover a broken system. Now we can help rebuild it. She closed her eyes for a moment, then stood. I'll do it. Huiying beamed with pride. That night, Mei Ling lay in bed, notebook in hand. Whispers, Part 6, echoes forward. She wrote not of battles won but of stories started, of revived schools, of children whose futures were brighter because someone refused to be silent. She wrote of hope grown not from victory but from standing when the world expected her to run. She wrote until sleep found her, head full of possibilities, because this was where the whisper became a roar, where the real rebuilding began. The first meeting of Lexington Global's Youth Advisory Council took place in the restored annex next to the old school. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating tables arranged in a circle. Mei Ling sat at the head, Chen beside her, with council members, students, teachers, community leaders, around the table. She took a deep breath. All right, she began. This is our world to shape. Let's start by asking ourselves, what do our neighborhoods need most? Hands shot up. Better after-school programs, safe parks, more Wi-Fi access, music lessons, mental health support. Mei Ling smiled. All of that. And we're going to do it together. Over the next hour, they sketched ideas, jotted down resources, and assigned roles. Lexington Global pledged funding and logistical support. The council decided on 3 initial projects, a mobile homework bus, a community garden in a vacant lot, and a digital mentoring program linking students with professionals. Mei Ling left the meeting feeling lighter in her chest, energized beyond anything she'd known before, not as a survivor, but as a builder. That evening at home, Huiying prepared dinner in their modest kitchen. The kettle whispered, bread baked. Mei Ling unpacked the day's notes, reading them quietly. Her notebook fell open to Whispers, Part 7, Roots of Change. She paused, her gaze drifting to the framed photo of her father on the windowsill. He had always believed words could change lives. Tonight, she felt his presence, that conviction. There came a knock at their door. Chen entered, carrying 4 bowls of soup. "Thought you might like something warm," he said, setting them down. Mei Ling smiled. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Chen said. "You're not just changing this company, Mei Ling. You're changing what it means to fight for something." Hu Ying set the table, her eyes soft. "Sit down, Mr. Lexington. You're eating with us tonight." As they shared the meal, the room filled with quiet warmth, a family forged not by blood but by shared purpose. Mei Ling looked around, her heart steady. The whispers had become a chorus, and she was only just beginning. "Thought you two might like a warm meal," Chen said softly, setting down the bowls of soup. Hu Ying smiled gratefully. "You're becoming part of our family." Chen shook his head. "This feels like family now." He sat with them at the small table, his tone growing serious. "The DOJ investigation is proceeding. Trials are set for Barlow executives next month. Huang will testify, cooperating for leniency." Mei Ling nodded, stirring her soup. "But there's more." Chen continued, "We suspect this network reaches farther than we thought, political donors, alliances built on corruption. We need to stay vigilant." Mei Ling set down her spoon. "Then let's shine light there, too." Chen looked at her, admiration clear. "We'll do that together." That night, Mei Ling uploaded a video to Lexington's internal platform, a welcome message from the Youth Council introducing their mission and inviting everyone to contribute. It went live company-wide. By morning, it was trending across Lexington's internal channels. Employees volunteered to teach, coach, mentor. Donations flooded in: books, art supplies, time. Mei Ling logged in to read a comment from a senior executive: "Moved by your passion. Would love to help." She grinned. Across Chicago, parents read about the programs and arrived at the community center offering help. The mobile homework bus filled with students every afternoon. The garden bloomed, and Mei Ling watched it all, believing. A few weeks later, in the restored school gym, a ribbon-cutting event took place for the bus project. Kids cheered. Chen gave a speech. Mei Ling stood beside him, ribbon in hand. "You made this happen," Chen whispered. Mei Ling nodded. "Not me. We made this happen." She cut the ribbon. Applause filled the gym. Hu Ying wiped tears. "Look what changes when people show up." Mei Ling looked around, from the 90-year-old custodian who volunteered weekends to the corporate staff who organized supplies. She realized even whispers can grow into echoing roars. That night, she penned one last entry in her notebook for now: Whispers, Part 8, Echoes. She wrote of collective voices joined, of communities remembered, of a voice that never quit. She closed the notebook, turned off the light, and knew sleep would come easier now because she hadn't just healed a building, she'd helped rebuild hope. That voice would echo far longer than any storm. The morning air in Chicago carried both clarity and promise. Mei Ling sat on the front steps of the revitalized schoolhouse, notebook open on her lap as children's laughter echoed behind her. Pencil tapping, pages turning, ideas being written. Her phone buzzed. It was Chen. "Clear your afternoon, please. Big meeting." Mei Ling looked at Hu Ying, who offered a knowing smile. Nodding, they gathered their things and walked together toward Lexington Tower. Inside the gleaming lobby, Chen greeted them. "We're hosting a joint summit with city leaders, educators, nonprofits." He gestured toward a hall lined with partners, urban planners, civic groups. "We want you here, too." Mei Ling's heart skipped. This was the next evolution, not just preserving her neighborhood, but rethinking how cities could flourish when they listened to the youngest voices. The summit hall filled quickly: city officials, philanthropists, school principals, parents. In the front row, Mei Ling sat with her notebook in hand. Chen stepped forward. "We called this summit because Lexington Global believes in rebuilding from the ground up. And from the ground up means starting with our youth council." He turned to Mei Ling. "Would you like to open our session?" Mei Ling stood, every eye on her. She cleared her throat, lifting her voice. "We found that rebuilding isn't a top-down project. It's a partnership. We're creating a network, a coalition for equitable communities where every neighborhood, no matter how small, gets a seat at the table." Her voice gained confidence. "We won't stop at our block. We'll bring mobile learning labs to underserved areas. We'll launch mentorship hubs and safe spaces, run by those who live there, and advocate for transparency because accountability works stronger when it's shared." The room erupted in applause, genuine, heartfelt. Over the next hour, planners and school board officials nodded along. Commitments formed, grants were pledged, a framework laid for cross-sector collaboration grounded in accountability and inclusion. After the summit, Mei Ling walked outside with Hu Ying. The wind felt softer, but her gaze was focused on what lay ahead. "I'm building a city that listens," she said. Nearby, Ms. Tanaka, the elderly teacher from the neighborhood school, approached. She placed a hand on Mei Ling's shoulder. You've turned whispers into movements. That's something no storm can quiet. Mei Ling smiled. Only because they were worth listening to. Huiying hugged her tightly. You gave them that voice. Later, back at Lexington Global's rooftop garden, Chen handed Mei Ling a presentation slide labeled Coalition Expansion Strategy, from boardrooms to playgrounds. I want you to lead this, he said. Across the city, across the region. You'll have support, and we'll follow your lead. Mei Ling's chest filled with resolve. I want us to be louder. Make every whisper count. That night, Mei Ling wrote in her notebook, Whispers, Part 9, Resonance. Not a tale of victories, but of many voices echoing together, calling for change, building things that last. She closed the page and looked out her window. The city skyline gleamed, unknowingly inspired by a girl who never stopped speaking, and that voice would resonate for years to come. The rain hadn't stopped all morning, a soft drizzle masking the tension beneath as Mei Ling, Huiying, and Chen stepped into the gleaming boardroom on the 30th floor of Lexington Tower. The city sprawled behind them, gray and steady, unaware of what was unfolding above. They were joined by the Youth Advisory Council, now a formidable team of young leaders, students, tutors, mentors, each carrying a vision born of their neighborhoods. Chen addressed the room. We have the means. We have the will. Now, let's extend what started in a single block to every community that needs to be heard. Mei Ling stepped forward with the council's proposal, an expansion model called Echo Hubs, local centers run by youth councils across the region, funded by philanthropic partnerships, tech infrastructure from Lexington, and mentorship from corporate volunteers. She scanned the group, young faces lit with enthusiasm, adult allies nodding in approval. These hubs will offer education, safe spaces, mentorship, mental health services, she said. But they'll also let communities govern themselves, create programs that matter to them. The room filled with energy, ideas sparking, voices rising. The council outlined plans for the first hub, a pilot in a neighboring district, with mobile libraries, coding workshops, and community-led forums. Lexington pledged to match every dollar raised by local partners. As the meeting closed, Mei Ling stood at the window, watching the rain streak across the city. Huiying joined her. You're not just saving a school anymore, she said softly. Mei Ling nodded. I'm helping build a world where no one's voice gets drowned out. Chen approached, holding a new folder. This is the blueprint for the first Echo Hub. It's yours to shape. Mei Ling took it, her fingers steady. Then let's make it loud. That night, she wrote one final entry, Whispers, Part 10, Amplification. She wrote of systems rebuilt, of communities that refused to be erased, of a girl who turned whispers into a movement that echoed across a city. She closed her notebook, not as an ending, but as a promise, a roar that would carry forward, unstoppable. A school principal raised a hand. What if a hub stumbles? How much control do you maintain? Mei Ling looked composed. We don't run them. We resource them. We train them. Then we step back and trust them to lead. Rakesh joined in. And we've built a secure digital platform connecting all hubs, sharing best practices, tracking impact, ensuring transparency. We're not dictating. We're amplifying. By afternoon's end, funding pledges, city permits, and community partners had signed on. Lexington Global transformed from a corporate headquarters into a launchpad for regional transformation. Later, Mei Ling and Huiying walked home through puddled streets. Mei Ling's jacket was damp, but her eyes were steady. Mama, this isn't just saving one school anymore, she said. It's building a network, making sure every child's voice isn't a whisper. Huiying pulled her close. You turned a whisper into a conversation. A week later, the first Echo Hub opened in a former community center with a grand ribbon cutting. Children ran between classrooms and computer labs. The mayor gave a heartfelt speech. Parents clapped. Mei Ling watched from the side, realizing how far they'd come. That evening, she typed in her notebook, Whispers, Part 10, The Waves. She wrote of young faces lit by opportunity, of schools reborn, of voices rising, not from power, but from community, clarity, and unyielding belief in tomorrow. She closed the notebook. Outside, the rain had stopped. A single rainbow arched over the city skyline. Because when one voice refuses to be silent, it doesn't just echo, it builds bridges. And those bridges can carry all of us forward. The Chicago skyline opened before them like a living map, streets like arteries, neighborhoods pulsing with life. Mei Ling sat beside Huiying on the rooftop garden of Lexington Tower, where 2 weeks prior they had celebrated the opening of the first Echo Hub. Now, partners from across the city had gathered to roll out the next phase. Council members from diverse communities, young leaders, educators, residents, sat around long tables set in the garden, representing over a dozen neighborhoods, each with its own history, pain, and resilience. Chen stood at the front, voice steady. These leaders helped us prove one thing: when neighborhoods are given tools, trust, and voice, change follows. He began. Today, we expand that conversation. Mei-Ling rose, heart-thudding but steady. We've launched Echo Hubs in 7 areas, and we're about to launch 8 more. Each will be designed by local youth councils, connected digitally and ethically, supported financially by Lexington. She paused, looking out at faces brimming with promise. Our goal isn't just to replicate a model. It's to spread roots, deep, local roots linked by shared power, purpose, and trust. One after another, youth leaders shared ideas: mobile clinics in Southside neighborhoods, evening coding workshops in Uptown, mental wellness peer groups on the West Side. They spoke of real barriers, trauma, funding gaps, transportation, but now they shared hope. After the meeting, as dusk fell over the skyline, Mei-Ling walked with Huiying along the rooftop path. You started with a girl who wanted to translate, Huiying said softly. Now you're building bridges across a whole city. Mei-Ling wrapped her arms around herself. This feels bigger. Every time someone picks up a paintbrush or opens a laptop in one of our hubs, they're declaring I belong. That's worth everything. That night, she wrote in her notebook, Whispers, Part 11, Constellations. No longer pockets of light, but stars connected by intention, belief, and unwavering youth leadership. The next day, news broke that Chicago Public Schools would expand its Sustainable Community Schools initiative, turning more campuses into multi-service community hubs offering health, education, after-school programs, and safe spaces. For Mei-Ling, it was more than coincidence. How do you know they didn't do that before? Huiying asked. Mei-Ling smiled. Because we're already building something similar. And when people see youth-led, neighborhood-rooted approaches, they can't ignore it. 2 weeks later, Mei-Ling sat on a stage at a civic forum hosted by the city's mayor. She was joined by youth council leaders from across districts. The mayor invited them to collaborate on policy advisory committees, a chance to redefine city governance with youth as equal partners. When it was Mei-Ling's turn to speak, she looked out at city officials, community members, and reporters. We started with whispers, she said. Now we're city makers in our own right. Her voice echoed as the room erupted into applause. As she stepped down, Chen caught her eye, giving her a slight nod. You did it. On the ride home, Huiying squeezed her hand. They finally see you. Mei-Ling closed her eyes and leaned into the city's hum. The real echo wasn't in the programs, it was in the voices. And now they weren't whispering. They were building. The late summer sun softened over Chicago as Mei-Ling stood in the former schoolyard turned community garden, a living canvas of resilience. Volunteers from 3 newly launched Echo Hubs were planting seedlings, tomatoes, kale, pollinator flowers, a deliberate choice symbolizing growth and renewal. She surveyed the scene, youth council members directing, community elders chatting, parents laughing. This garden wasn't just growing produce, it was growing unity. Huiying approached, gently holding a metal watering can. You've created something bigger than any of us, she said softly. Mei-Ling looked at her mother, sunlight dancing in her eyes. It started with one voice. Now look at them all. That afternoon, Chen and Mei-Ling hosted a strategic planning meeting in the refurbished annex. Community leaders, educators, administrators, and youth convened around tables scattered with blueprints, budgets, and notepads. On the wall, a city map glowed with pins marking all Echo Hubs and community school expansion sites. The council met last night, Chen began. They want to propose a citywide umbrella organization, a youth-led coalition for equitable community schools. It would link Echo Hubs, sustainable community schools, and local school councils under shared governance and data transparency. Mei-Ling nodded. We can integrate advocacy, peer training, resource sharing. A community organizer chimed in. This broadens our impact and our voice in policy. Eyes turned toward Mei-Ling. We want to host a public forum, she continued, to bring communities together, share what's working, and demand accountability from the systems that failed us before. The public forum was set for a month later, planned in the same community center where it all began. Mei-Ling and her youth council worked tirelessly, coordinating with schools, nonprofits, and city officials. The event would be live-streamed, open to all, with youth leaders presenting their vision for a city reimagined from the ground up. On the day of the forum, the community center buzzed with energy. Families filled the seats, holding signs that read Voices Matter and Youth Lead the Way. Mei-Ling stepped to the podium, her notebook tucked under her arm, her voice steady and clear. We're not here to ask for permission, she said. We're here to build a future where every neighborhood thrives, where every child's voice is heard, where no one is erased. This isn't the end of our story, it's the beginning of a movement. The crowd rose to their feet, applause thundering through the hall. Huiying stood in the back, tears streaming down her face, pride radiating. Chen, beside her, whispered, "She's not just a whisper anymore." Mei-ling looked out at the sea of faces, young and old, united by purpose. She felt her father's presence in the words she spoke, in the conviction that carried her forward. The whispers had become a roar, and that roar would shape a city, a region, a future. That night, she wrote in her notebook, Whispers, Part 12, The Roar. She wrote of a movement born from one girl's refusal to be silent, of communities rising together, of a world where voices, no matter how small, could change everything. She closed the notebook, looked out at the skyline, and knew this was only the beginning. The public forum was electric. In a packed auditorium, parents, council members, CPS staff, older persons, and youth stood side by side to call for structural change. They proposed seats for youth on local school councils, transparent budget disclosures, and shared decision-making frameworks that included older persons, CPS staff, and community members to ensure equitable power sharing. Huiying watched Mei-ling listen, deliberate, and guide consensus. For the first time, her daughter wasn't just reacting, she was architecting change. Alderperson Alvarez took the mic. "You've built a bridge I didn't even know needed building. I'll bring your proposal to the City Council's Education Committee." The crowd erupted in applause. That night, Mei-ling wrote in her notebook, Whispers, Part 12, The Movement. A network no longer whispering, but shouting the truth of collective power, built in community, not to it. The next morning, media headlines blazed, Chicago Youth Coalition invites city to rethink education governance. Grassroots voice gets seat at table as local school councils embrace youth leadership. Journalists interviewed Mei-ling and youth leaders. They spoke not of sound bites, but of resident-led accountability and cross-system equity. Within CPS, a senior official noted, a youth-led coalition could help our Success 2029 equity goals if aligned properly. Weeks later, Mei-ling sat on the rooftop with Huiying and Chen, reviewing the proposal's draft language for youth representation and governance. Schools across Chicago were piloting youth delegate positions. The coalition had created a manual to train youth applicants in policy and budgeting. Chen smiled. "You've turned this into something institutional." Mei-ling exhaled. "It's only the beginning." They looked out over a city quietly poised for change, a constellation of voices no longer whispered, but recognized. Sometimes, a whisper from the margins becomes the drumbeat of a movement. Spring arrived in Chicago with a breath of renewal, not just in emerald buds unfurling across parks, but in the rhythm of a city learning to listen. Mei-ling stood before a new school entrance, not rebuilt but newly constructed, the Zhou Learning and Community Center, dedicated to her father's memory and carried forward by the voices of youth. The building blended classrooms, a community garden, a tech lab, and a small auditorium. Children drifted in and out. Parents watched. Teachers greeted. The air held anticipation, joy, purpose. Huiying joined her, tears in her eyes. "Look where your whisper brought us." Mei-ling's gaze swept the courtyard where youth council members organized the ribbon cutting. "It wasn't just me. It was us, together." The mayor, standing beside Chen, addressed the crowd. "This center is proof that community, courage, and caring vision can reshape our city." The ribbon snapped, and children poured forward. Mei-ling walked inside, Huiying at her side. In the main hall, she found a desk set up for her, a modest plaque reading, Youth Advisor, Coalition for Equitable Community Schools. She sat, opening her notebook to a clean page, blank with possibility. Later, she walked through echoing hallways as kids discovered books in the new library, tapped code on computers, painted murals in art rooms, and collaborated in conversation pods. She smiled, recognizing quiet leaders forming around her, not whispers anymore, but voices ready to echo. That evening at home, she set her notebook on the windowsill. The final entry read, Whispers, Part 13, Full Circle. I started as a girl whispering truth in a room that didn't want to listen. Now, this city listens because change begins not with power, but with speaking. She closed her eyes and let sleep come easy, knowing her story wasn't just a legacy, it was an invitation for voices everywhere to rise. The story of Mei-ling teaches us that even the quietest voice can spark a movement when it speaks with truth and purpose. It reminds us that lasting change begins at the grassroots with empathy, persistence, and the courage to challenge injustice. Through Mei-ling's journey, we learn that empowering communities, especially young people, supported by elders, educators, and residents, leads not only to personal transformation but to collective healing. In a world often dominated by power and noise, this story is a testament to the strength of listening, unity, and the enduring impact of one brave voice.